Been doing this for 16 and a half years. I've handled probably over 4,000 cases. There's really never been one like this. She finally gets to come home to her dad, to her stepmom, and she gets to live a normal life.
We're being followed by media right now. We don't know what to do, so what happens if they're going to show up, they follow us to the Airbnb? What are we going to do?
That's just crazy, baby. They must have been on us the whole time.
Maybe they knew what hotel we were at.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Thursday, August 29th, 2024, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Listen, there is some new rumors circulating in the Gypsy-Rose Blanchard's sphere of people, whether you like her, hate her. She claims she's an influencer, but there has been some strange developments happening in Missouri over the last several weeks, and now her case, which had previously been available to the public for nearly a decade, is suddenly offline. This decision to take the case offline has a lot of people scratching their heads, specifically because once a case is loaded into CaseNet through the state of Missouri, unless the case is expunged or fully disposed, meaning completed, and they decide to take it off CaseNet, it's very rare that a case would go confidential or offline. So this had a lot of internet sleuths wondering, does this mean that Gypsy could be facing new charges? What is going on? Why would her case that's been available to the public since June of 2015 suddenly be disappearing from CaseNet? Well, depending on who you talk to, you could talk to Brianna Heinz, who is Gypsy's apparent new spokesperson. She claims that this case is only unavailable because logically, according to the attorney, a judge could have added new layers of security, taking the docket offline. This is what Brianna had to say on her TikTok. She's full of answers.
Her lawyer says there is no legal reason that they can't see it. Let me repeat. There is no legal reason that they can't see it. The only thing he can think is it's possible that the presiding judge increased the security level to stop people from filing requests. And if it is extra security, which is what it probably is, that's the most logical thing he can think, it forces one of two things. An attorney can enter and have access, or you can go to the actual courthouse and file. And yeah, that's the only logical explanation he can think of.
Brianna has this habit of taking whatever Gypsy says as fact and just running with it and taking whatever the lawyer says as fact. I think it's really bizarre that Bree, is releasing information of an attorney, what an attorney is telling Gypsy. That's just strange, frankly. That's a level of weird I don't understand. But his hypothesis is that a judge ordered an extra layer of security to take the case offline, and the case could then only be available if you go to the court or if you were to file into it as an attorney. This is an unusual step and very rarely ever taken by a judge. Judges do this when there are reasons, though, and a couple people filing requests to the court for documents would definitely not be a reason why a judge would add an extra layer of security. The case on CaseNet had been available since July of 2015. The case had been deemed public, meaning anyone in the public could have access to the case. The case was never deemed confidential at any time during the last near decade. For the judge now, almost 10 years later, to decide to take this case and push it offline seems a little bit more suspect than simply stating, we need more security. Now, she's claiming that the logical reason is because there's been requests for records to the court. The state of Missouri cannot stop anyone from requesting a Freedom of Information Act request to a court. In the past 8 months since Gypsy has been released, only 3 requests have been made. Hardly a lot of work for a clerk to request records 3 times. One was to a news outlet, Second one was to, I don't know, someone. And a third one was to an Amanda Moore, who some are saying is a parole officer in the state of Missouri. Records were shipped to Amanda, certified records, on August 20th. The case went offline on August 28th. I did some digging, and because Brianna doesn't have an answer, and not even her attorney has an answer, her attorney simply said there's no legal reason that he knows of that the case would be offline. Now, in order for a case to be sealed in the way that it is, one of two things would have had to happen. The prosecuting attorney would have had to file a motion to seal the case, or Mike Stanfield, her attorney, would have had to file a motion to seal the case. And either way, Mike would know if that motion had been filed. He would know because he would have been involved in it. So it seems unlikely that this is the answer. Now, I did look at court operating rules for confidential records in the state of Missouri, and there are some rules. For instance, confidential records can be maintained so as to be inaccessible to the general public. These records include sealed or expunged records. They can include court docket sheets and indexes for these matters, and the following, including court docket sheets and indexes for these matters, are confidential. So I want to just remind you, until yesterday, August 28th, everything in her case had been deemed public. So what would classify a case going confidential? Mental health records under section 63141, records pertaining to a SV predator, juvenile court records, adoption records, papers and records other than the interlocutory or final judgment in a paternity case, records of any grand jury proceedings, true bills issued by a grand jury before the defendant is arrested under section 545, no true bills which are to be sealed, criminal psychiatric evaluations, pre-sentence investigations, probation and parole reports, drug court records under this section, motions and court orders and test results for STIs, juror questionnaires for individuals comprising criminal jury panels shall be sealed, information that identifies a person as an applicant of a recipient of an IVD services, search warrant applications until the warrant is returned or expires, filing information sheets, victims of SOs, and any other unspecified reason which files under a general rule. So there's actually nothing in there that says that a judge will add it because a bunch of internet people were making requests online. So what could be happening here? Well, if you notice, there's several here that don't even have anything to do with Gypsy's case. Obviously, it's not a civil case. So anything relating to paternity, adoption, juvenile records, mental health records, and the like, which weren't a part of her case, would not be the reason. Drug court would also not be involved. Having a psychiatric evaluation wouldn't be involved. And that wouldn't put the whole case sealed. That would just put that portion sealed. But what I found interesting here is that 3 separate items: records of any grand jury proceedings under Chapter 540, true bills issued by a grand jury before the defendant is arrested under Section 545, or no true bills, which are also to be sealed. So what does this mean? Well, in the state of Missouri, there have been times when a judge removes a case off of CaseNet. Why? Because a case is in a grand jury. And in order for a grand jury not to be tampered by evidence and not to be influenced by case information, the case will be taken offline and not available to the jury pool, so they can't search any of the records. That means there could be a pending indictment. The only time I've ever seen this happen in the years that I've covered court cases was once. This happened in Arizona with the FLDS leader, Samuel Bateman, and this occurred during his case when new defendants were added to his case. At the time, a grand jury was presiding, and the grand jury was not allowed to have access to the court records. So the case was removed off the website. Once the true bill came back from the grand jury and he was indicted along with new co-defendants, the case returned back online. Former inmates that have gone through this in the state of Missouri have stated that it's not uncommon that if new charges are going to be added to a case, or for instance, a parole violation, which is also a felony, is going to be added to a case, that can take a case offline. If, for instance, the federal government gets involved and they have a presiding grand jury, they will also take any of the state cases offline. If Gypsy were facing any federal charges, let's say that that's one option. She would have no clue If Gypsy was facing an indictment by the federal government, unless she was a witness to the grand jury and brought in on the charges to a grand jury, which doesn't always happen in criminal cases, very often the criminal involved does not go to the grand jury because they don't want to tip off the defendant that they're going to charge this person with a crime. And in that case, the federal government actually does not have to tell someone if they're under a federal grand jury investigation. That's the beauty of the federal government. So Mike could say there's no legal reason, but he also could not know. They can sometimes let someone know via a target letter that they are under investigation, but they rely on grand jury secrecy. They meet with juries in secret. The activity, the deliberations, and the records of the grand jury are secret. Grand jury subpoenas can be sent to individuals to testify in person or documents and evidence. Violations of grand jury secrecy rules are punishable as contempt, and target status letters can be sent, but they don't have to be. If the federal government has reason to believe that tipping off someone could tamper the investigation or cause evidence to be destroyed, or if they believe someone to be a flight risk, they may not tell that person. They may not even need that person to be a part of the grand jury to get the indictment, because all a grand jury is it's a process where they have to decide if there's enough probable cause to bring forth charges that the federal government is presenting to the grand jury. They don't have to determine if if the person is guilty or innocent. They just have to decide if there's enough evidence for these charges to be brought. Because of that process, Gypsy, if she were, say, a target, might not have any clue. So, say that's an option. Say the feds have stepped in and they're like, the state of Missouri, you really screwed up. You don't let someone out of prison that's done this to their mother after 10 years and let them become a celebrity and profit off of this. You're making this an embarrassment to the United States. It's an embarrassment to our society. It sends the terrible message. And Gypsy's case always has had the option of what's called dual sovereignty. This means that there is no double jeopardy if a case is committed federally and state. So if someone is convicted in Missouri for a crime, but the case also encompassed federal jurisdiction, it can be tried in both places. In Gypsy's case, hiring Nicholas Godejohn to commit the crime by paying for him to travel and paying for his, his Greyhound bus, his hotel room, it could be viewed maybe as murder for hire. That's just wild speculation. There's also mailing the weapon. There's the interstate travel from Missouri to Wisconsin. If they're going to look at the case of Dee Dee, that could be an option. But it's maybe something not even related to the original case. Say something's happened since Gypsy's gotten out of prison. Say they have become aware of possible money laundering. Say there's maybe something where they question if tax evasion is happening. Maybe there's questions about all of this money that's going to all of these different projects she's involved in, but she's profiting off of the crime and hiding money. We really don't know. One of her former inmates that was in prison with Gypsy mentioned that the only time she's ever seen this happen in Missouri is when a case goes federal. And sometimes the federal government will step in, like I said, when they believe that the state screwed up. It also could be a parole violation. So say there's new charges that they're going to add and they need to pull it offline while they work through the parole violation process and add new charges to the case for the violation. This would make it so that if there would be a new trial, that again, they're going to get an indictment for the violation. They don't want to tamper a grand jury with the possibility of it going public. They pull it offline because they don't want to have any information available to a possible grand jury that they could research that could influence their decisions within a grand jury. They need to be completely impartial, so everything goes offline ahead of an indictment. Again, I've only seen this happen once, and it was when someone was indicted. I've only seen this happen once, and again, I read an article the only other time a writer has seen this in Missouri was when a new indictment was coming. Now, again, Gypsy's attorney says there's no legal reason, and that could be the case. And again, he could also not know. What I can tell you from my own personal knowledge of the family and the situation is based off conversations I had with them in July. Now, I recognize it's a month later, and I understand that this could be completely irrelevant, but it's just something to think about. My last conversation with Christy Blanchard was revolving around something that was going on with, and there was a very serious concern that Gypsy was going to be revoked, that her parole was going to be revoked, and that she was going to be going back to prison. The explanation that she had given to me wasn't actually the truth. And it was because she claimed that Gypsy had left a comment on a former inmate's TikTok, basically saying, "Thank you for sharing the truth about me." The likelihood that they would be violated for something like that was not probable in my mind. It was later revealed that Gypsy got in trouble with communicating with inmates. She was not only talking to inmates still incarcerated, but she was using her ex husband Ryan's Securus account to make contact with these inmates. Gypsy let one of her friends know, who at the time was dating her other inmate friend, a prison relationship, that due to the fact that she had been in contact with inmates, she would no longer be able to talk to Amelia Bird. She stated that this was her final warning and her next violation would send her back to prison. Now, I don't know if Gypsy was telling the truth, right? So, Christy had told me that they had gotten the call from Parole about these communications. Gypsy was forthright, she claimed, about what had happened. And they claimed that this was reported by someone on TikTok, although I don't believe that. She said that they spoke to the parole officer in Louisiana who is managing the interstate compact. So she is in an interstate compact, meaning she is living in Louisiana, but she is still overseen by Missouri. There's an interstate compact team based out of Jefferson, Missouri. Her parole officer is named Trevor, but he doesn't have the final say because he's the interstate compact parole officer. The final say actually goes to the parole board and the parole officers in Greene County, where her conviction occurred. So Christy had said to me that she was worried that Gypsy was actually going to go back to prison. And I'd asked her why she was worried about that. She said they contacted Gypsy's attorney, and her attorney said that there was a possibility Gypsy could go to prison for this. He said that it was more probable that she wouldn't get revoked, but there was a chance she could be revoked given the severity of what she had done and the stipulation that she had violated. And Christy had mentioned that the parole officer had been trying to stop by to see Gypsy that day. And instead of being there to see the parole officer, Gypsy went to the aquarium with Ken and said she wasn't going to be home. So when a parole officer wanted to make a home visit with her, she and Ken went on a day trip to New Orleans. Christy claimed there was no issue with that, but she was still worried and she wasn't sure if Gypsy was going to be revoked. There was very real concern at that time that Gypsy could go back to prison. I cannot understate that. For the past month, Gypsy has spent less time on her TikTok than she normally had. She has not been going live as frequently. When she does go live, she doesn't stay online for very long. She does makeup, she says next to nothing, and her views are going really far down. She doesn't have the same kind of interest in people watching her put on makeup than when she was, acting a fool on TikTok and people were like, I want to watch this train wreck. The restraint that she has had online and the fact that she hasn't been going live as much and the fact that she hasn't been as visible and the fact that she's been heavily relying on Bree suggests to me that there had been some concern about what she was doing online. She had already gotten in trouble earlier in the year for her online behavior, and her parole officer at the time had told her to delete her social media. They told her to delete her Instagram and her TikTok. She never deleted her TikTok. Never. Gypsy has not been a model parolee by any stretch of the imagination. Gypsy has blatantly profited off the crime and the infamy that she's received from being her mom's perpetrator. No one would know Gypsy if she hadn't unalived her mom. That's the truth. No one would care who she was. The only reason people care about who she is because of the crime. Without the crime, Gypsy is no one. So Gypsy can go online and say that she's telling her story, but the reason she has the story and has a platform to begin with is because of the crime. I've had a lot of conversations with people that have come out of prison family members that have had inmates that have gotten out of prison. And the conversations have been that what they're allowing to happen right now is completely embarrassing the state of Missouri. And it's sending a really bad message, not only to children that, hey, if you kill your mom, you can become famous, but it's also sending a message to inmates that if you get out of prison, you can become famous and get wealthy. It's motivating prisoners to want to become famous. They want to be celebrated and get the same things that Gypsy has. When we elevate people like that, when we give them these kinds of opportunities, when we allow them to walk red carpets, when we give them interview after interview, when we grant them book deals, and then you know that the family is willingly hiding money from the victim's family in the event the victim's family wants to sue her. They're hiding money intentionally. They're hiding money from the government. They're hiding money from the victims because they know what Gypsy's doing is wrong. That's a whole nother level of crime. I can't say for sure what's happening, but I've said this more than often than not. When Gypsy and Christy were fighting in July, there was a very serious concern she was going to be revoked. It's a month later, and as you know, in the wheels of justice, nothing happens quickly. It could be that she's going to be violated. It could be that she's not going to be violated, and it's just like Mike Stanfield said. But all of it remains highly suspicious, given that this case is a murder case and they are never private because of the offense, ever. And a sealing of records would be known to all the attorneys involved. Mike Stanfield would know if a judge made that call. He wouldn't know, though, if his client was under a grand jury and they hadn't told him. So what are your thoughts? Is Gypsy going back to prison, or is this just like Mike Stanfield said? Much ado about nothing. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.